Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Okay.
And if anybody misses on the break, definitely step out and grab beer. There's plenty more out there.
There's two up front.
And there's two right up front.
And now, before we get started with some introductions, I just wanted to open it up to the crowd and see if anybody knows or can define what cult love is, or what does cult love mean to you? Happy to also pick a couple people out of the crowd. You would think this would loosen up with a couple beers. What about right here? Yeah.
It's when you're super passionate, like almost to the point where you would get a tattoo. Great.
Well,
Not almost. You should see our social feeds every week.
We have a lot of tattoos. A lot of tattoos.
Micky, do you want to start with just a quick introduction? We can kind of go this way, and then I know we have a video to introduce, and we can kick this off.
Yeah, sure. I'm Micky. I am the founder and president of Bakery. We've been an agency for 13 years. I am an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, as I tell people, even though I masquerade as a white guy. But yeah, been in the States for about 19 years now, and yeah, happy to be doing this for brands like Nike and Kellogg's and Diageo and stuff like that. But yeah, I think our main dogs are Shiner, local Texas brand, cult brand, and like what we're talking about today, like building, breathing kind of life back into a brand that deserves it, that is doing all the right things. All that stuff has been kind of a really cool challenge for the past 4 years, and yeah, excited to talk about it today.
Nick Weiland, head of marketing for Shiner. Is this on? I just gotta hold it closer.
Yeah.
All right. Nick Weiland, head of marketing for Shiner. Been on the Shiner brand for about 7 years. Classical CPG marketing background before that. Brands, companies like Kimberly-Clark. If anybody knows the Blue Bunny ice cream brand, headed that up for a little while through a relaunch. Really worked on some brands that have had to go through similar life cycles of heritage brands around for a while, needing to kind of keep themselves fresh, reinvent it, and make sure that their message is still relevant to today's consumers. I'm an immigrant from Iowa, but I did get to Texas as fast as I could. You know, that's what they say here. No, I was actually, I chose Texas specifically. I spent a lot of time here and loved the state, and honestly, you know, being able to lead the Shiner Beers brand is my dream job, and I'm not going anywhere unless they force me to. But the amazing brand, the kind of cult love that we have, it really isn't just from our consumers, but it's from pretty much everyone in our entire chain. Not only our employees, but our trade partners, our wholesalers, and then obviously most of our really dedicated consumers. So it's a huge asset for us, but it's also a responsibility and one that we have to steward and be the stewards going into the future.
Great, thank you. And I will say the two of these, they seem to be exemplary at like the way in which they collaborate together and the relationship that they've built together. We're going to talk a little bit later about like how that relationship works as a brand extension and a true partnership in order to build that trust. Before we do that, my name's Chap. I've worked at L'Oreal, Turner, all the holding companies. I got sick of the corporate bureaucracy basically and started my own company. We're about 5 years old. All we really do is focus on creating incremental value for brands. And so you don't have to go to your CFO and ask for more money. We just create it for you. And then we skim off the top with a little bit that takes up for our service. But with that, I think we have a video that we're going to talk about a little bit the brand culture within Shiner and the relationship that we have here today. If we could roll that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ron Delirious here with the Culture Ride.
Culture. Culture is a language that you don't need to know how to speak, but you should work to understand. Culture is the theater by which we express and cope with the world around us. Culture is not an act of exclusion, but an act of refinement by born outsiders like Shiner, started by immigrants who wanted to bottle a bit of their old home and a bit of their new one. We never changed shape, but instead shaped change. We don't simply brew Texas beer, we brew Texas culture. Not for the stereotypical cowboy, but for the real Texas, El Paso to Dallas, Houston to Austin, we brew the invitation to a broader belonging. We brew community history with our music, film, and art. And yeah, we brew beer. Lots of beer. The same beer that Texas has loved since 1909. Well, not just that one. In partnership with Bakery, Schneider has overhauled their portfolio to meet a more diverse and more female audience in Texas and the 50 states. Together they've created a new line of IPAs, the first ever beer brewed with cactus water, cocktail-inspired seltzers, a new Mexican-style cerveza, and even brewed and bottled the TikTok trend. Innovation has been used as a brand-building tool. Difficult, but not impossible with brand partners.
Bakery's been a huge partner for us, not just from a traditional brand agency relationship when it comes to communications and design, but truly a business partner and helping us drive innovation in particular.
Culture can't be joined or adopted. It needs to be written and added to. It starts with product, mission, values, risk, and truth. Because culture isn't a thing, culture is everything.
So how many people in this room can do the whole Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song from start to finish? I got a couple people. As we get started with this today, I wanted to see if both of you could kind of define what cult love means to you and kind of go into a little bit on how your partnership works, because from what we were talking about previously, it's not just a matter of like creative agency or media agency. Like, both parties are taking on some of that risk and helping to influence what new products can or are and how that drives profit for China.
Oh yeah. I mean, the cult aspect is interesting. You know, we've, I guess, I want to say maybe about 6 years ago, our sort of claim to fame as an agency was LaCroix water. And I mean, I think a lot of people would define it as, you know, well, today another client, Liquid Death, is kind of like a cult brand. We're sort of a weird agency in the sense that, like, I wouldn't say we don't like position ourselves as like we're for the cult brand. It just happens to be we've landed on those types of businesses quite a bit, and maybe they're onto something when they look at us or something. But I think the understanding that, like, the rules need to be written for the consumer and not for your legal department, for your board, for your what. Like, no one gives a shit. You know, the consumer gives a shit about you giving a shit about them. And if you, again, we said this maybe multiple times when we talked initially. This is not rocket science. It's just about, like, be a person and understand, like, what people are into and that you're talking to people, you're not talking to Excel sheet cells, and you're not like, you know, I think some people might think like their programmatic plan is like, you know, the shit, whatever, and it's just like, no, it's like, not really. So I just think that the culture is about being able to be in the flow of what's going on with the people that you say you should care about as a brand, then care about them and be in the flow of what they're doing. And it changes pretty constantly, and especially today with the rhythm of, you know, social media and digital, like, really pay attention to it, invest in it, stay on top of it. Stop using the term best practices. That shit means that it's old the day you set best practices. So, like, also, by the way, we're in the business of standing out. The moment someone says best practices, I'm like, so everyone's doing that? Awesome, let's try this over here. So, so really, it's I would say, like, it's a tough thing to define across all the industries and brands that are here today, but it is about just being a little more legit and authentic, and I know that word, you know, like, but yeah, just be real, and things should work out.
Yeah, I mean, I would all of that, and what I would add on is it's really about showing you have the deepest understanding of your consumer, right? And like, the example for us is we're a national brand. Yes, we're distributed in all 50 states, but our identity is Texan. And there are national brands that come into Texas. It's a very attractive market. It's actually the #1 light beer market in the country. So brands like Miller Lite, Bud Light, Coors Light, the list, all the usual suspects come in, they'll slap a Texas flag on their can, they'll put the shape of Texas on, and honestly, they can probably spend enough money that they're actually breaking through and creating that connection. We're not necessarily going to beat them on dollars. We can do it in certain areas, but not at the scale that they have. And so for us, it's about, we have to show we have the stronger message. Our creative, our messaging, our mission, and showing that we understand our consumers, it just has to be better. We have to do better in order to win on the same playing field.
You talked a little bit before about, I don't want to say throwing strategy out the window, right? But
We didn't say that.
It's more about going after tactics when the trends are happening. And I guess my question comes back to your statement. It's like, can you strategize for cult love, or is it just something that happens while you're planning for other things?
No, you absolutely strategize for it, but part of it is also like you said, like jumping on trends and things. That is you do that, but the moment that that's all you do, you're beholden to what's out there, and then some of what's out there is not going to match up with your brand values, your brand guidelines, things like that. I understand are still going to be things you're going to stick to. So if you're just waiting for the next tweet or the next thing, you might have some gaps. But if you also focus on, I don't just have to be a trend follower. I can actually set some trends. I can actually get out there and take certain risks and actually build that as part of my marketing strategy, where it's like, I'm going to create buckets of risk, and I'm going to bet enough into each bucket that if 8 of 10 of those are failures, but the 2 that hit,
Yep.
if anybody here is not aware of Blumhouse Productions and their model, you might want to check them out, but they've revolutionized Hollywood by doing exactly what I just said. So they made movies that you've never watched, like Hush, which is a failure, but they've also made Get Out, which everybody watched and was nominated, for an Oscar. And that movie had a $4.5 million budget. That's it, and it made over $800 million at the box office. So the 20 movies that he made that year that failed didn't matter because they all cost him $4.5 million, but he made $800 million off of a single one because he was putting different chips into different places, what I call tactical hedging, and that's honestly the future. Anybody that's telling you we can predict what people are going to do, we can predict, human behavior, kick them out of your office. That's not true. We're all very irrational, strange creatures that do weird things, where we had a pandemic and people were telling us, wear a mask, and half the country was like, no, and you're like, it doesn't make any sense. Every movie you watch before that has a pandemic, the government's like, wear a mask, and you see people out with the suits and all that stuff, the hazmat or whatever. It's like everyone complied. It's like, nope. So it's a weird place we live in, and you have to leave room for the weirdness. You have to leave room for the diversity in how people are going to respond to any message you put out. I know he's not very popular right now. But when you talk about somebody like Kanye, who for a while, I know, very unpopular moment, but for a while, this guy was our genius, in popular culture and in fashion and everything. When he said, I'm going to make a sock shoe, because I work at Nike, I've been at Nike for a while, I can tell you everyone laughed at it and it was like, no, that's not what we do here. We make performance shoes. You can't run in a sock shoe. And he's like, I don't want to run, I want to go to the club. And it's just and then he went to Adidas, who said, we'll make your sock shoe. And it almost, Adidas at that period took over the second spot from Jordan Brand, something that people thought was not going to happen, and they were coming after Nike until Nike changed their perspective on how they went after lifestyle as well. So you have to take risks because it is really the less risky thing is to take risks. Keeping it the same is the riskiest option, and that's how you're gonna fail. If that's what you're doing.
Let's stay on risks for a moment, but I feel like we should circle back and ask you some of the weird things that you do since you brought it up. But maybe that's for drinks later. But Nick, so when you guys are taking risks or you're focusing on innovation, in my experience, there are a lot of stakeholders that are involved. We mentioned legal is one of them, procurement maybe another. Is it about bringing them into the conversation early, or is it about just asking for forgiveness later?
A little of both. Ideally number one, but in reality number two. Honestly, most of the stuff that we have done together, and you didn't talk a ton about it, but Bakery's been a partner for us not only for branding and creative and messaging, but for innovation as well. And thinking outside the box, and like the idea of cactus water and then the IPA, and bridging that gap between what's our positioning and our messaging, and then the actual product we're putting on the shelf. A lot of the time it's a matter of just going out and doing it and proving that it's right. And if the answer at first is no, you keep going and you show no, you're wrong, and I'm going to show you. At some of the organizations I would have worked at in the past with layers of bureaucracy and hierarchy, that becomes much more difficult. Not impossible, but you have to have the right people that are bought in. In a smaller, Shiner's a family-run company, family-run business. We have ownership and leadership structure, but it's very much a culture that is saying, we're going to go out and try these things, and very supportive of that. So luckily, we don't have to hide it. There are some things we ask forgiveness for later on, but it really comes from the top, and having them on board and proving it out. Once you get a couple of wins under your belt, the next one becomes a lot easier.
And when you say prove it out, you mean sales, you mean clicks, you mean impressions? I mean, I don't want to really spend that much time on measurement, but it's important to define the language that we're using.
I mean, sales is the only thing that really matters. Yes, to all of those other things, yes to, I think like our equity and long-term brand perception, which we'll actually put above sales a lot of the time, but, ultimately, at the end of the day, the sales have to be there, or you're not going to get the go-ahead on that next one.
Yeah, and what we were talking about earlier, too, is like, again, not throwing strategy out the window, but using it strategically, is when you're making innovation, like, look to pilot programs, right? Like, don't throw all your eggs in one basket. Like, test and learn, and that's been a theme of the conversations that we've all been having today, but I don't know if either of you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
I mean, the other thing I'll say to kind of build on that, because it's easy to say, yes, you've got this sales threshold, and if it doesn't meet that, then it's not successful. You're still tempering it based on what the expectations are. So if there's an understanding, we're going to take a chance on this, right? And the outcome is, this wide of potential outcomes, and we're going to be pretty happy if we can get a quarter of the way there. Now, our goal is down here, but realistically, we're going to be very happy if we land somewhere here in the middle. And there's kind of that understanding of, this is our target, but this is our point estimate or whatever.
So under promise, over deliver.
That's just a matter of understanding and just having those open and honest conversations. And again, it's a little bit different when you're talking about a public company where you've got to do quarterly forecasts, and one where you're like, we're going to roll the dice on this. And fortunately for us in the alcohol business, we don't have things like slotting fees that we have to pay. We can just kind of produce something, go and put it on the shelf, and give it a chance. Our test market can be the real market.
But how can other companies, maybe of larger size that have some of that in play, maybe pilot some of this thought process, right? Because where change happens and where positive change is in that risk, and where innovation comes from is that risk, right? And sometimes people are risk averse.
My experience with that is that's going to be based on what the culture of the company is, and not, I know that a lot of the chats here and in panels like this one are, this is what you guys should do, and from a certain lens and a certain perspective, it might sound easy because you might be at a company that embraces, a certain level of risk-taking, a certain level of a culture internally, right, that allows for those things to happen. But in a free market like we have here, you're also going to have other companies that are, they're just not aligned with something like that. From the top down, it's, for whatever reason, right, like, sometimes it makes sense for whatever that business is and their shareholders and all that other stuff to just like, don't touch it, don't move it, just like do nothing at all, and it frustrates everybody down, all the way down. For the companies that do have the opportunity, so I'll only speak about those, I would say, I know that in Brand Innovators there are not a lot of agencies here, so I guess I'll be the agency, like, person here to speak about it, but one of the things that I can tell y'all is extremely important is if you do have buy-in internally from your leadership and your board and everything else, you have to bring your agency into an equal footing. You have to bring them in as partners in what you're doing. They're not vendors, or at least I hope you're not hiring a vendor. You know, again, I said if you're in one of those brands that gives you the opportunity and you have a brand that's able to make some waves in market, then I hope you're not hiring an agency that's a vendor, you know, that's just like, you know, taking a task and deploying it like they're on Thumbtack or something. You gotta bring them in as a partner across the board, like the things that I can assure, I mean, we were seeing, for example, Chili's present great work earlier today here, and everyone applauded it and everything. But part of the reason why that's effective is, and I met those guys out there, and I told them, the first thing I said was, it just looks like you guys are having a ton of fun out there, you know, and that's the truth. Like, and they said, we are having fun right now, you know, and that's that's the 1,000-yard stare where it's like, we've been in situations before where we haven't had fun. We're very happy we're having fun right now. And the agencies they're bringing in are agencies like Mischief and Weiland Kennedy, and those agencies already are going to take a client where they don't have the option to have a voice in the room about everything, about like, here's how we do, like what you want to do, here's the way to do it, and here's the way we would do it. And that's really the thing that's going to make sure everything from top to bottom is just beautiful and gorgeous and like, and resonates with the people that it's supposed to resonate with. The moment that you think you are smarter than your audience, than your consumers, you've already lost. You don't know more about what people want for themselves. You just don't. And that's where I've always had a problem with programmatic stuff and that kind of thing and whatever. It's always about like, almost like getting a leg up on somebody. It's almost about like, oh, people are just consumers. All you gotta do is put some stuff in front of them. They're just gonna click it. And it's like, they can't stop themselves. It's like, you're just like, who do you hang out with? I don't know who these people are, but like, no, I think consumers can be smarter today than they've ever been, and they're gonna research everything that they do, and they're gonna look at everything before they click on that thing, and the reviews and the everything. So treat them the way that you would treat somebody that knows exactly what they want, and just try to be there with them with something that they care about. And then everything else starts to fall into place for you. Your product innovation, you know, you start to understand the best way forward for me is, let me innovate on what I have here, let me build the marketing into this, let me make this great, then let me go and put a campaign behind it, put it in market, put it in the right markets, distribute it to the right people, and let me make sure my messaging is aligned with them and what they're expecting of me. I don't need to force anything, good or bad, right? Because there's bad stuff, which is just sales, you know, like the big sales message. There's good stuff too that has its place, but don't force it necessarily as a brand. We've seen it fail too when it's like, even, you know, as a Latin American guy, I've seen, you know, a lot of like brands try to tell me what, as a Latin American, like, you know, this is, hey, you should buy me because I put diversity in my ad. And it's just like, but your product sucks. I mean, like, it's kind of strange, but there's a lot of like stuff where, I don't know, we drink a lot of our own Kool-Aid at the moment, and again, this isn't rocket science, it's just about people.
Well, that and I think the industry as a whole tends to overcomplicate things for no real apparent reason, and I found a lot of the value comes in oversimplification, right? Not the acronyms, not all the software jargon or whatever it is.
It's about getting boys to men to sing Baby
Yeah,
Got Ribs, you know what I'm
well,
saying?
it's how do
You have a brand
Exactly,
that they want
right.
to be a part of,
Yeah.
then you get things like that, right? And so it's like, yes, we want to be a part of Chili's. We want to go out there and put our names with that. And, you know, I just kind of building on what Micky said around, and what you said around simplifying the structure, you know, just getting the message right and building off of it. You know, I talked a little bit about this earlier, and it was a bit of a kind of scary decision, but we had a call, you know, several months back where admittedly our social channels had gotten a bit stale, and we had a very rigid structure. It was, you know, these many posts that are talking about this type of subject matter, X number per month, per week. We've got pillars, we've got all of these different ways to look at it. And you look at the whole body of the creative, best practices, you look at the whole body of creative that came out of that, and I'm like, I don't want to follow that channel, right? I'm not interested in that.
You're talking at people as opposed to with people.
Right, and basically I said, just throw all that out and just create cool stuff for a while. And, we'll come back in a few months and check it out. And it has worked, right? And we've just been creating things, the engagement has been up, the creative has flourished. And it was kind of a scary moment to say all right, we're going to get rid of these things that are saying I'm doing a job, right? That's part of my job is to oversee and make sure that we're achieving all these objectives. But
My social channels are really stupid.
My bigger
but I
job
love
is
them.
to
They're really
manage
dumb.
the long-term vision of the brand. So that was that decision.
Can you take us a little through your journey on how you guys forged this relationship and also how you foster talent within your own group? Because that's really where a lot of this culture comes from and is replenished.
I mean,
I don't even like this guy.
In terms of how we got connected, nothing out of the ordinary there, right? Referrals, connections, just kind of being in the industry and having someone make the introduction for us. But
the trust came along the
getting over
way.
that threshold, right, really came. And when we first talked, when Shiner and Bakery first talked, they basically, Micky came and said, we don't pitch, right? And it was, it was like our work speaks for itself, we don't pitch, but for Shiner, we're gonna pitch, right? And it was kind of this understanding okay, we appreciate that kind of confidence in your work, confidence in yourself. That's kind of what's at the crux of our Shiner brand, honestly. It's this very kind of strong Texas swagger to the brand, right? And it kind of pretty much from the get-go just felt like we were all walking the same direction, talking the same way, and it was a natural, obvious choice.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is having worked at agencies and holding companies, I mean, that can take 6 months, a year in some cases, or sometimes you never have it because you never have that direct brand connection. And I think we're moving into a world, or have moved into a world, where the brand extension as part of your agency or your partner is really being prioritized. And that's what's fostering this culture and this innovation, as opposed to the disconnect between church and state or verticals that really no longer exist, but they're there for legacy purposes.
Well, I don't think it's any secret right now that there's, right now for the agencies anyway, the agencies that are flourishing are a lot of independent agencies, a lot of small agencies are doing quite well. That's because I think we're starting to see the correction from the last 10 years. That was the digitization, right, of our industry. Everything was measurement, everything was this and that and whatever. And you were just starting to see Forrester and Cantor and all these other folks publish pretty damning reports on, hey, 30 to at times 45% of what's being spent on digital ads and stuff like that and programmatic is absolute waste. It's not even getting to anybody. It's a wrong click. It's that's about half of what your spend is a lot of times. And then you're continuing to see that the things like Liquid Death and brands like Nike and all that stuff, they continue to be the leaders in their in their respective segments, and it's all creative. The thing that's compelling is storytelling. The thing that's compelling is bringing somebody into, or at least aligning with them in a culture that they understand, a language that they understand, and entertaining them for a minute, just enough so that they might give a shit about what you do. And in bigger agencies, they just move a little slower because of the size, right? So they're a little more of a Titanic, and a smaller agency is a little more of a Ferrari, right? So the smaller agencies have been formed based on you have people like Mischief, you have Greg Hahn leaving BBDO, starting a small agency in Mischief, and he's the big agency guy who, instead of moving the Titanic, said, I'm jumping ship, and getting on the little dinghy, and now is kind of taking the market by storm in a lot of ways with their brand and doing great work. And And you see the same with Anselmo Ramos and Gut, even though they just got bought out. So yeah, a little sad day for indies out there, but good for them. Good for them. Good for them. They buy the next round of can. But the smaller agencies, I think, are showing their prowess when it comes to creative work. And the thing that used to be the weakness for the smaller agencies, which was we don't have the infrastructure for all that digital and all that, the tools and the measurement and the whatever. Now brands are kind of like, I kind of don't care about it anymore, as much as I did before. I care about the creative, and you do have that. And you have that at, like, you're not trying to sell me on 80 other things. I just need this thing. And so that's what's going on, in my industry, in my backyard, and I think it's great. So when it does come to a brand right now trying to be relevant, trying to, change things, it starts with changing themselves, and if they can't do that, I don't know if any agency will be able to help them, indie or not. It starts with, like, recognizing the fact that, like, I need to go to market with things that are great and people care about and people are going to talk positively about, not just put out whatever comes off the assembly line, and that does take stronger partnerships with everybody around you, not just the creative agency, but your PR agency, your media agency. Like, it takes really strong partnerships with everybody around you, so that, and being able to also, like, referee those groups, because sometimes, we don't get along.
Well, that's always been my challenge, right? Is in some cases you run into healthy competition, but sometimes that competition can get in the way of innovation.
Sure, but as the brand, it's your job to make sure that that doesn't happen. At the end of the day, you have the power. You can just say, like, you're the dad in the room or the mom in the room, where you can just say, hey, stop it, it's done. Go to your corner, and come back. And you can just do that. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot of times you just hear a brand manager tell you, hey, I just want my agencies to get along. And he tells you that, but then he tells
I'm going to cut $10 million of your budget.
And that's about it. And then, but there's nothing happening in between. And to be truthful, these are organizations that have very different cultures, very different approaches to the work. And I would say a lot, if not most, even great CMOs, great VPs, the one trick they probably don't do is curate their list of agencies. Like, who am I bringing for media? Who am I bringing for, so a lot of times they're like, oh, I'm going to have Havas for media, but then I'm going to get this little, 30-person agency that's awesome and so cool and, like, counterculture and whatever. And it's like, so you think Havas is going to sit in a room with these guys and it's going to be just...
Well, let's not name names here, right? But what's right for some is not right for all, I think, is what we're going with. Do we have time for a few questions, or no? Okay, I'll just try to summarize real quick before one question maybe? One quick question? Right here.
Does having a strong brand culture and history make it easier to innovate, or is it more of a risk? Like, is your consumer trusting you with IPAs, or like, oh, they're selling out and getting an IPA game?
That's a really good question, and I'll try to be brief on this. Our current IPA brand is not our first attempt at it, right? We've had a couple of false starts,
not with us.
Yeah, trying to get into that space. And so, yes, I mean, to your point, that was actually, in certain ways, holding us back, right? It was, our consumer hadn't given us the permission to do that, right? They were expecting different things for us. And so that all just came back to setting the tone and saying, we have to think differently, right? And when we did the IPA that we currently have, that's actually continuing to grow, now going into the third year, that was from the ground up. We said, basically, the brief was throw the Shiner brand out the window for a second, create an IPA brand from the ground up that, feels like it has its root in Texas, but that IPA drinkers want to drink. And then, there's going to be a litmus test. It has to make sense coming from Shiner at the end of it. But that was not number one on the brief on that.
Well, thank you, everybody.